Hey, welcome to Spring Air. We're going to work on assessing your home's heating system with a view to installing a cased coil, and that's or an uncased coil. But either way, this is the coil assessment type of tutorial. You can see here that I have the supply air duct, cold air return, turns to the furnace. Furnace pushes the air up through this device here is called a plenum, and into the supply air duct and feeds your home with conditioned air. And what we're concentrating on is the coil. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is a cased coil. There's two types of coil. Actually, there's three or four types of coil, but for us, we just need to talk about a cased coil and an uncased coil. So let's discuss a cased coil. The easiest thing that you could have done, and I hope you did that, is just to call a Sears and a contractor. You have them come over and then say, hey, what size coil do I need? If that isn't what happened, then what you can do is take the cover off the furnace, write down the model and serial number, and then call the distributor for that product, York, Goodman, Heil, whatever, in your area, carrier. Ask them how much the case coil is for that. It might get expensive if you have a Carrier or Lennox, and they might not even sell it to you. And if that's the case, then we have to come to this tutorial and start working on it. But that is the easiest way to go. So if that hasn't happened, let's take the measurement so we know what has to happen. Like I said, I'm going to get rid of this plenum right now so that you can see. If you come up to this, more than likely to get the measurement of the top of the furnace where the coil would have to fit, all you have to do is get the length and the width. And if you get that, that'll tell you what size case coil you'll have to have, because I would say 99% of all installations, this plenum is tied right to the furnace where the coil would sit. Okay, and so let's take a little bit better look at that without this plenum. So this plenum is here because somebody's come to your home and they've installed a furnace in there, and we've got this thing that has to connect our ductworks together to our furnace, and that's called the plenum. But if we can see if we can't get that to pull down. I'm sure I can because I pulled it up. There we go. This is what it looks like without the plenum on it. This is what your furnace looks like. It has a lip around it, and that's where the coil has to sit, the case coil. So like I said, more than likely if you just measure the plenum length and width, you can get the size of the bottom of the coil. If you feel that this might be longer than what's actually the lip size in there, that's okay too. The plenum size, if you can find a coil that is the plenum size, that'll work. And 99.99%, it'd have to be really odd. Now, once you take that measurement, you got that measurement, you can start looking around for cased coils that fit. So you go on the Goodman website, or you can go on any other manufacturer's website and see if they have a case coil that fits in the size that you need. So if you need a 2-ton coil, then you have to look around for 2-ton coils to make sure they fit. Now if you have let's see, a cased coil, and we're going to, here's one of the pitfalls of using the case coil. There's usually enough room to do this, but it's not always the case. So let's try and get this to come up. Okay, let's say you found your case coil. All right. Orbit this. And it's looking good, but you also need one other measurement. You need to know if the coil itself is going to fit inside of this duct dimension. I know it's not making sense, but it will with the picture. Okay. I'm not going to be able to get this up any higher, but I can certainly illustrate it. Okay. When you first come to your, this isn't the coil installation, so we're not going to talk about that. But what you're going to end up having to do is cut this plenum when you're going to install the coil. So what we need is, let's say this is your case coil. I'm going to mark it out, and you found your case coil, and your case coil is this high, okay? Let's say it's 22 inches high from here to here. You're going to need to have an extra 12 inches from here up into the supply. Because remember, we're going to eliminate this part right in here to slide the coil in, and then we need to have 12 inches between the top of the coil box, the case, and where it's going to connect up on the plenum. That's real important, because if it's below 12 inches, you won't be able to connect the pieces of metal. Or let's put it this way, you'll have a super hard time building your own connection. And what I mean by that is that this has to connect to this ductwork, and it has to connect via some metal. So what we are having to do is we have to take, let's see if we can illustrate it real quick. I've got to get this to go all the way up to the top, and it's going to be a problem. Maybe. Yeah. Keeps trying to throw me inside the ductwork. When you cut the ductwork, you usually end up cutting it. There we go. That should get us really, really close so I can make a good illustration for you. And like I said, this is not an installation. When you originally go to install this coil, what's going to happen is you're going to have to cut this ductwork. Now remember, this is for a cased coil, and this is what will happen. You'll take the measurement for the duct, for the coil, and it's going to be from here to here, let's say 22 inches. Right, from there, that's 22 inches, because you've got the coil and you said, oh, I've got plenty of room and this one's going to work for my furnace. Okay, so let's say that's 22 inches. Next, you have to make sure you have from here to here at least 12 inches. I've done them 10 inches before, and it's very difficult. So you're going to cut this up 12, 14, 16. I recommend 16 to 18 inches. 16 to 18 inches. And you're going to cut this duct, and you're going to cut it out. Okay? And what usually happens is when you're doing this and you're going to install this this coil right here, okay, before you install that coil you have to cut this ductwork that exists. So what I usually do is cut it the height of the coil plus 16 inches, and that gives me plenty of room to work, and it makes it look really good. But if you don't have 12 inches between here and this connection, it's going to be a really difficult install. So you want to make sure. Now, like I said earlier, I've done them at 10 inches. And that means I've got 10-inch space in between here and this duct connection. But really, you need to have 12 inches. If you don't have that, we have to do something different. And if anybody runs across that, then I'll make another video that explains what we have to do that's different. But for this video and this tutorial, we want to have that space in there. So you take the measurement of your coil height, and then you measure your ductwork and make sure you've got an extra 12 inches above your coil height. That way you won't have any problems putting the coil inside of there. Okay, so that's that. Now let's talk about the cased coil. And what the cased coil is it's, or an uncased coil, I'm sorry. An uncased coil is just what it sounds like. It's just an uncased coil that has to go inside this chamber that's above your furnace. And a lot of times, some people, they'll order the coils and the coils are just like absolutely just the wrong size. For one, you have to make sure that it's, you know, within an inch from the width and the depth of the size of the plenum, or the size of the top of the furnace. Okay, so it has to be, when you're doing this, you want to make sure that this coil is pretty darn close to this width and this length right here. And the reason for that is this coil has to slide inside of this guy, and then me and you and anybody else who's trying to do this, we have to cut a hole in this. In fact, I'll show you exactly what we're going to end up doing. When you do this, you cut a hole in this thing, and this will probably work. Yeah, there you go. That would be alright. We end up cutting a hole in this guy, and that is where we slide the coil. So if this guy, select that if we can, okay, and then so we're going to cut this hole and we need to slide this coil inside here. Well, it has to be pretty close to the dimensions of this plenum, and I would say within an inch either way. It can't be wider or longer, or you're going to have a heck of a time installing it. But it has to be able to fit inside this length and width, and within an inch or two. And what you're going to end up doing eventually is you're going to end up with a let's see if I can open this back up real quick. You're going to end up with a with having to build, if it's smaller, we have to build shelves, because the whole point is that we don't want air to go around the coil. So again, there's when we put the uncased coil in here, okay, it's got to slide in, but if you look inside there, it's like there's really no place for it to sit. So it could very easily just, you know, fall inside the furnace. So what we end up having to do is we end up having to build shelves in here so that the coil has something to sit on. And it'll look just like this when we build a shelf. It's fairly simple, but again, it illustrates the point that you want to have a coil that pretty close fits to the size of the ductwork and the opening on the furnace. But you can see what I'm doing is we use tin here and or sheet metal, and we will usually make a shelf like this inside here with four posts in it, and then we slide the coil in, and the coil rests on this. Okay, and the main point for the shelves is, one, for support, and two, we don't want the air to blow around the coil. Air has to blow up through the middle of the coil, and when you get your A coil, you'll see the bottom of the A coil has a hole in it, and it's where air has to get forced to go up through there. Okay, so by the time all is said and done, you should have these shelves, and let's see if we can't draw an A coil real quick. And you'll have this A coil that we have to slide, and let me push that in. Oh, it won't push. Let me work with it, maybe it will. It's weird. It should push or pull so I could show you. Let me try and pull it. No, it won't let me do it. That's very strange. Anyways, I guess if we look at it from the front, usually I can make the whole coil and it should just kind of push right in and look really cool. Edit monsters coming here. It's midpoint. There we go. Alright, so let's say we got the coil. Really? And the coil is gonna, it's just, come on now. Why? Why are you fucking with me? There we go. So the coil is going to go just like that. And you see what it's doing is if you have the proper size coil, it has to rest on these shells. Right here, here, and here. So that we can, you know, put it inside there. And this is exactly what it would look like with the uncased coil sitting in there. Okay? And that's why you have to take these measurements and make sure that these coils fit inside there. Because if they don't, you're going to have a nightmare of a job and you're going to have to call a professional to come put the coil in. So hopefully that helps you guys out. And with this as well, you have to have enough room up on top too, but only for the size of the coil. You don't have to do it the exact, you don't have to add the extra 12 inches for this one, because what we're going to do with this is all we're going to do is, like I showed you earlier, we're just going to cut a hole that's the size of the height of this and then slide this guy in. So you don't have to worry about anything above that. Easier in some ways, but you know, it's not as professional and whatnot in other ways. So I think that'll work for us. If there's any questions or comments, leave below, and I might have to make another video for any other anomalies that might come up, or if anybody's not exactly 100% sure, or if I was just babbling. So talk to you later.